My brothers and sisters, there's a very wise and fascinating pattern in the Quran regarding being good to parents. And that is that the opposite instruction is almost never there. In other words, Allah Azza wa Jal over and over again, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانِ, we entrust the human being to be good to his parents. And you never find in the Quran that Allah gives you a wasiyah to be good to your children. It's very wise because it's natural for it to be labor to be good to your parents. It's work. Whereas it is very natural, it's instinct, even if you weren't human, to care about your kids, to care about your young, to care about your offspring. So you don't need to be reminded about your kids. So you're not reminded about your kids. Except in one ayah in the Quran. And that too is just exquisite in its wisdom. What was it? It was the scenario where you don't realize that you could be harming your kids. It was a discussion on inheritance. The breakdown of the estate distribution after you're gone. So it's something goes beyond the radar. It's not my life. Because never in my life am I expected to be consciously harmful to my children. Who does that? Animals don't even do that. But Allah says, when it comes to death and estate and inheritance, yusikumullah. It's the only exception. Allah yusikum entrusts you regarding your children. This is how it should be broken down. Meaning, fear Allah about a moment you may not want to think about or even be expecting when your kids are going to go to war with each other, unless you clarify, I want the distribution to be Islamic. I want the distribution to be fair, i.e. Quranic. And this reminds us of the fact that many times, not just after death, even during life, there could be unintentional harm. Of course we love our kids. Of course we're going to try to protect our kids. But we could do so incorrectly in a way that has unforeseen consequences, unforeseen ramifications. You know, I remember personally about 10 years ago when I made the firm decision that I have to leave the big city. My son had just been removed, my firstborn, from the baby carrier to the car seat. He's sitting upright. And we were at a red light, and he's scanning. He finally can see through the window. And at that red light, there was people on the corners entangled in haram ways. Men and women, or the same gender as well. There were some very indecent scenes happening in broad daylight. And it hit me because I've dealt with so many youth and parents bringing them to me, and how in the world can I lie to myself and say it's going to be okay? It's going to be okay to expose my child for 15, 20 years to this, and they're going to come out saying anything but what's wrong with this. Why did Allah restrict these people? Why is this haram? What's wrong with love? It's a beautiful thing. Right? And I said, I'm not going to go to sleep during this war. I'm going to try my best, knowing I never fully can, so at least as much as I can, insulate them from becoming desensitized to this. I'm going to leave the big cities. A place with less billboards, less sidewalks, a place with less exposure. And this is just the only message that I wish to share with everyone. That you as a parent naturally react, even if it would cost you every penny, even if it would cost you your life when you know you're under attack. But the sustained attack against our kids, against our loved ones, is the reason why we keep getting caught off guard. It's the more subtle stuff that abduct our kids long term that we should be worried about. You know, I had a very odd instructor for world history in 10th grade, public school. He was an open alcoholic, but he was also very resistant to a lot of norms in society. And one day, he came to us in class and he said, have any of you ever cooked frog before? And we're all like, what? And he said, people, amateurs, don't know how to do it. They want a fresh frog. They don't want to get it from the freezer or something. And so they bring it home alive and they boil the water and they throw the frog inside. He said, and this is silly because you throw the frog inside, boiling hot water, the frog always jumps right out. He reacts. He says, the way to do it is to put the frog in cold water and then turn on the flames, the frog will start slowing down and then stop. And then after he said that to us, he said, by the way, I've never eaten frog before in my life. That's disgusting. But this is what happens to everyone when they're comatose into the numbing effect of social conditioning. You don't know you're under attack, so you don't react. So he's telling us, stay awake. And I want to say to every parent, it is the dangers that you don't see as dangers you need to be the most awake about. Nobody tries to be a bad parent. Nobody tries to harm their offspring. You know, there was a seminar in our monthly or bi-monthly parenting seminars held here at the masjid about the concept of holding on to your kids. And this is actually a title of a book that you should all be reading or listening to in audio form. It is called Hold On to Your Kids by Newfield. Gordon Newfield basically wrote this book a few decades ago. It's very profound. He basically says parenting is not complicated. It's not easy, but it's not complicated. It's not a riddle. He's saying people have been parenting the way they want for thousands of years successfully. Meaning regardless of where you're from, your kids come out the way you expect. Why is it all of a sudden, algorithms right now? Why is it all of a sudden rocket science? He's saying, and the whole parenting industry didn't help, because the parenting industry makes you feel like, oh, I'm just one parenting seminar away from figuring it out. I'm one more parenting book away from finally fixing my kids. I'm just a one hack or skill left, and I'm finally going to get it right. He said, and it's all a ruse. This stuff, yes, it's helpful. He's saying, but the most important and the missing puzzle piece is your kids don't care how hard you're trying. It's about working smarter, not working harder. He's saying the whole problem is orientation. Your kid's not oriented to you. In other words, in psychology, they call it attachment theory. Your kid's not attached to you. And so if they're not attached to you, you're never going to be able to have any influence on them. This is the idea. He's saying in the past, the reason why parents were able to do what they wanted of transmission of value, transmission of belief, it's because the structure was vertical, right? Kid gets from parent, parent gets from grandparent, this transmission. He's saying now it's been flipped on its head. And now the feedback comes horizontally from peers. And that's a disaster, of course, right? You think about social media, but he wrote this before social media. It's been 10x'd by social media. He spoke about the school system, not as a conspiracy, just the reality that you spend so much time with peers, equals, and peers are what? Just as inexperienced with life as you, just as insecure as you, not as protective of you as the parents are, right? And so it's a recipe for a disaster. He's saying, so the whole fight is how to win my kids back. And he goes on to discuss this. But that idea of the Quran and the Sunnah telling us how to win over the hearts of your children, how to make sure your children are not abducted from you in broad daylight, meaning abducted from you while still physically in front of you, but their minds are impregnable. I can't get through to them. The Quran and Sunnah showed us how to do it. How to not just love, but express love. Not just to preach gentleness, but to live gentleness. Not just, to appreciate forgiveness, but to exemplify forgiveness. How not just to preach righteousness, but also to embody righteousness. The whole package is there. And so, in other words, our children are in danger because we don't recognize they're in danger. And because they feel if they break away from their peers, it's dangerous, right? They're too vulnerable to break away to appease their parents. And many times, by the way, parents come and they feel betrayed when they discover what their child has become. No, it's just, if you really knew the reason, you would feel bad. You wouldn't be as angry. You'd be half angry, half sympathetic. Because they were just showing you what would appease you because they want to stay somewhat attached to you. And they were showing wider society, which they spent most of their time with, what wider society wanted to see, so they can also have that sense of security. It was all like a vulnerability dynamic, all of it. And so of the ways to orient yourself, or have your children oriented to you, is to recognize some of their needs. As if you have a cheat sheet, and you do. As if you have the master manual from Allah and His Messenger, and you do. And I'll give you a few quick examples. Example number one, the Quran and Sunnah, both. If you're reading attentively, you will realize that we know that girls have an affinity, have a fondness for beautification. It's just natural, normal, fine. Girls care more about beautifying themselves. That's a need of theirs. The Prophet ﷺ one time, think about this, he stood on the minbar and he had silk in one hand and he had gold in another hand, and he said, هَذَانِ حَرَامٌ عَلَى ذُكُورِ أُمَّتِي حِلٌّ لِإِنَاثِهَا. These two materials are impermissible for the males of my nation, of my ummah, permissible to be enjoyed by its females. The scholar said, you would expect haram and silk, gold and silk to be haram for everybody. Because think of just gold. Gold, to allow it to be used as jewelry, lessens the currency that's available out there, right? Less gold out there. Also, gold being used as jewelry is not going to be for everyone. It's going to be for the people that can afford it. And so that's going to break the hearts of the poor, to see those who can afford it be wearing golden jewelry. So you'd think gold would be haram across the board, but it's not. Why not? Because Allah, the Creator, knew that women had a need, a greater need than men, to sort of ornament themselves with some gold, with some silver, with some jewelry, right? Of course, silver is across the board for men and women. And so once you know that, you're able to tend to that. You have a daughter, you compliment your daughter. You have girls in your family, you give them safe, permissible ways to sort of beautify themselves, not in the public sphere. And then once you give that, you tend to that need, that's going to orient them to you, right? You're going to be able to say, by the way, what's most important is what's on the inside. That's what's going to allow you to get in. By the way, Allah does not look at your images or your bodies. He looks at your hearts and your actions. You can say that 1,000,000 times without them being oriented to you first, without you recognizing, validating some of their needs. It won't work. That's the idea. I'll give you another example. Boys or young men, when they sort of become young men, they develop a greater attractedness to women than to almost anything else in life. A blaze gets ignited inside of them. And the Prophet ﷺ expressly told us this. It's natural, normal, very dangerous to ignore. He said, مَا تَرَكْتُ بَعْدِي فِتْنَةً هِيَ أَضَرُّ عَلَى الرِّجَالِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ أو رِجَالِ أُمَّتِي مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. I have never left after me, meaning from me till the day of judgment. This will not change. Don't be in denial about it. I have not left after me a trial, a test, more dangerous, more potentially harmful for the men of my ummah, of my nation, than women. So when you sort of validate that, what do? You facilitate marriage, right? You create a reasonable timeline, right? For when I can get married, so that they can commit to that timeline, if it's reasonable. You start putting reasonable safeguards. Parents came to me a short while ago and they asked me to speak to the boys about being more chaste and dignified in the way they interact with women. Because we're seeing, weird stuff happening in the masjid and outside the masjid and online. These same parents, after I probed a little bit, it's not my first rodeo as they say, take their kids to the beach in the summertime. How does that work? Do you understand what it means to be a man at 13, 14 years old onwards? There's a system. You can't pick and choose from the system. You have to recognize and validate this is real. So a part of that is the marital expediting process, right? A part of that is safeguards. Don't tell me, movies are harmless. I'm sorry, they're not. If you watch movies at home, you're doing your family in. Mainstream movies, almost any movie out there will trigger those desires, will corrupt those hearts. This is not the healthy expressions we're talking about. And so you want chastity, you want lowering the gaze, it's called marriage, it's called, learning to fear Allah Azza wa Jal, all of this. And I'll give you one final example. Girls and boys, men and women, have an inborn, all of us, human, have an inborn desire for money and reputation. It's normal, Normal. Adam alayhi salam wanted a bigger kingdom, wanted a longer life, put more sort of under my name. This is normal and human. But at the same time, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ما ذئبان جائعان أرسلا في غنم بأفسد لها من حرص المرء على المال والشرف لدينه. That no two hungry wolves being let loose upon a flock of sheep. Look at the image. Being let loose on a flock of sheep will do more damage to that flock. Imagine the carnage, how they will ravage that flock of sheep. They will not do more damage to that flock of sheep than people being fixated, being addicted, right? Being so keen on money and on reputation will do damage to your religious commitment. And of course, religious commitment means your well-being, right or wrong, in this world and the next. And so to validate this, a young man, Jazahullah khairan, he said to me yesterday, can we get a course on like where we can make money? It's part of education. We deserve to tell them. Like everyone's out there making money in ethical and unethical ways. Can you at least give me a halal avenue? Because I don't even know. What isn't haram? What isn't haram? Allah had ordained that the halal is more than the haram. Maybe nowadays the prevalence of the haram is blinding. It is. But show them it's okay to seek out wealth. We want you to seek out wealth. Good money in the right hands is a great asset. Reputation, we want you to care about your reputation. Absolutely. But on what standards? Don't stoop to that level to monetize yourself online or go celebrity status online, right? Wealth, and think about how the internet has done that these days. Wealth and fame. What will you exchange for it? But until you tend, they will not orient, you will not be able to impart. You will not be permitted access to regulate in healthy ways. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ونبيه ورسوله. And so once again, my brothers and sisters, it is unintended but tragic, right? Oppression of our loved ones, oppression of our children, oppression of our youth, and even ourselves when we don't orient them to us by catering to some of their needs. I'm not saying, a'udhu billah, give them what they want. No. Give them what they need in a way that they want. And as a developmental psychologist, I read for him the other day that one of the hardest things to break to parents in this day and age is that there actually is no solution for your kids alongside the tech addiction. That is the most perfect way. It's not the classroom. It's not the sidewalk that I began speaking about. It's not the billboard. It is sort of the virtual classroom, sidewalk, and billboard. It is the endless, instant gratification. They don't want to unplug. They're afraid to unplug from that. And so if you want to do that, you're going to have to offer something in exchange. You cannot ask people to check out of what they like, no matter how shallow it is, and then resign to avoid. You have to create for them alternatives, create for them better, more fulfilling relationships, create for them sort of intellectual reasons. You got to educate them. You have to create for them spaces to act out these needs of theirs. Identify for them what it is. And in a nutshell, a big part of that means we need better masajid yesterday. We need better Islamic schools yesterday. We need better Muslim neighborhoods, cul-de-sacs yesterday. Whatever part of that you can play that role. Play that role and let people follow in suit. Play that role even if nobody follows in suit, so that we can say in front of Allah Azza wa Jal, we didn't fall short of. We didn't hold anything back. Allah knows what you do and what you don't do. Allah knows what I spend and what I hold back. We can say, Ya Allah, you know I put it all on the table. I left it all on the floor, as they say. And I'll end by saying that when I began this khutbah, asserting that it is natural for any parent, human or animal, to risk themselves for their child, I want to tell you that on the day of judgment, that will no longer be the case. This is not just for the welfare of our children. That may be your greatest incentive now, But on the Day of Judgment, even that parental instinct, that universal one, gets reversed, where people will walk away from their most dear, beloved children in that child's most needy hour and only be worried about themselves. So may Allah Azza wa Jal help us protect ourselves and our families from the fire, whose fuel is people and stones. Allahumma ameen. May Allah Azza wa Jal allow us to facilitate the paradise of this world for ourselves and our loved ones, this world before the next. May we find that tranquility and that stability, and may we find that sweetness and that gratification and that liberation that only our faith can provide. Allahumma ameen.